Karen Gustafson, to me, is one of the most important people in this community. She's not only terrific at her job, but she's a resource for so many people who are not even associated with the Y. When things need to be done, very often people will go to Karen and ask her, how can it be done? And she'll tell you. She's a brilliant mind. She's a strategist. She can see beyond what most people can see.
Karen Gustafson's a remarkable lady. I've had the pleasure of working with her on several committees, and over the years we have developed a great deal of mutual respect for each other. I have the highest admiration and respect for her. She does a first-rate job, she's persistent, and she really knows what she's doing.
Karen is one that finds solutions. She will come to you and say, well, we have a problem, but wait, I have these possible solutions. Or if somebody comes to her with a problem, she'll say, well, let's look for the solution. Let's not agonize over the problem. And this is a very unique ability of hers to do. I think not many people have that quality.
Well, Karen is, I think, the best example of a professional in her field of financial development, and has, I think, not only representing herself and representing the YMCA in a very professional way in that work, but I think it's helped her contribution to helping upgrade that whole profession by her association with others that are in that field.
Karen's made great contributions to Sarasota. Along with Carl Weinrich, she certainly has put the YMCA on the map, but she's also done a lot of other things just in terms of the nonprofit community. Her work with the Women's Resource Center should always be remembered. But also just in terms of giving dignity and respect to fundraising executives throughout this community. There's a tremendous amount of fundraising that takes place here, as everyone knows, and Karen makes it a profession that everybody's proud of, because she brings grace and consideration of the donor and just such skill as an executive to the whole process.
Karen Gustafson began life in the midst of the ravages of World War II.
I was born on November 9, 1943, in a little potato village near Bayreuth, West Germany, called Engelmannsreuth. My mother had moved us to Engelmannsreuth from Nuremberg, where the bombing was very heavy. She had a cousin out there, and she felt that she and my two sisters needed to move into the country to be safe from all the bombings and strafings. So I was born there. My father's name was Erwin. He was in the infantry. I was born on November 9th, and he was killed on April 20th of 1944.
The impact of her father's death and the events at the time made a lasting impression upon young Karen.
So I guess in some respect, I have great empathy for what has happened to the Jewish people. I guess in some fashion you might say that I was a victim of that war as well, losing my father, who hardly at age 24 was into the Hitler mentality.
Life in post-war Germany was very difficult.
There was a lot of fear after the war. I don't care how young you are, and can't stress it enough for small children, how impressionable small children are. A lot of paranoia and fear, neighbors watching us being watched by the government. Definitely not a place that my mother felt that she wanted to be in post-war Germany.
Her mother devised a plan to move herself and her 3 young daughters to the United States.
So we were near a military base called Grafenwehr. My mother was a great one to create opportunities for herself. I think she knew that nothing would happen in this little tiny village. So on Friday nights she and all the other girls would go to the dances at the PX. And of course the object was to meet an American soldier who was single and have the opportunity to come to America.
Her mother's plan was successful. she met a master sergeant, George Thomas Clark, and was married. Soon, the family's adventure moving to Mount Sterling, Illinois, began.
When we came over, I remember the boat trip. We came over on the USS Henry. Mother and we three girls had to come by ourselves, spoke no English. Our father had come ahead, which was typical in those days, had to clear the way for us to come, and everybody, my mother's friends said, they all do this, American soldiers do this, they go to the United States, he'll never call for you. Of course he did, he adored Mother and he adored us, and he called for us.
Upon arriving in New York, the family learned their first lesson on the differing cultures of Germany and the United States.
You know, cultures are different. And when I grew up, we could have a little bit of beer with the meal. In fact, we always had a little bit of beer with the meal, you know. And we went into a New York restaurant, and my mother ordered our meal, and she ordered beer, and then she got little glasses, and she put a little beer in all three of our glasses. She didn't know any different. And the waiter was kind enough not to throw us out of the restaurant. But anyway, after we were finished, he came over and said, "Madam, in the United States, children drink milk." So that was the last time we got beer at a meal.
At first, life in Middle America was a difficult adjustment for 3 young German girls.
And we felt a little bit isolated because I spoke no English and Mother spoke very little. So my grandmother taught me how to speak English through comic book reading. We came over in March, and that summer I did a lot of comic book reading, and by the time I entered the 4th grade the next year, about midway through, I won the spelling bee.
Graduating from high school in 1962, Karen's family's finances did not permit college. Instead, she went to business school.
I went to business school, was certified as an executive secretary in Springfield, Illinois, and there many opportunities opened up to me.
Among those opportunities was her first job in 1963 as one of 7 staff members for then Illinois Governor Otto Kerner. The position provided her with an excellent foundation, but brought with it some difficult tasks. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was struck down by an assassin's bullet. The next morning, Karen sent the governor's condolences to Mrs. Kennedy.
It was a very grim morning. I still remember the machine. I don't know what it was called, but it was soft paper, and you put it on, and this wheel went across and kind of burned and came back across. But I remember thinking, well, this was quite a historic thing I was doing, to send the condolences of one of the 50 governors to Mrs. Kennedy at the White House. And of course, by that time, the governor was already in preparation to go to Washington, if not on his way, for the funeral.
After leaving the governor's office, Karen remained in government, becoming an administrative assistant and marketing director for the Illinois State Department of Agriculture.
And there I was privileged to go all over the world. Illinois was the #1 export state, and I got to go on trade missions all over the country, and really I felt grew as a young woman and in trying to find out what I wanted to do further with my career.
When Governor Kerner left office, Karen left the government employ.
I went to work for Ralph Hahn and Associates, a multidisciplined engineering architectural firm. Mr. Hahn was also a University of Illinois trustee, and I did 5 years there. I learned an awful lot about proposal writing, specifications, technical things, and learned some discipline. Having gotten out of politics, you aren't as disciplined when you're involved politically.
It was also here that Karen met a man who would change her life.
Nels came to Springfield, Illinois to Ralph Hahn and Associates as a consultant from Chicago. He was very highly respected as an electrical engineer, and we had a very large project at Ralph Hahn and Associates called Operation Turnaround, and that was to provide tractors to Russia.
I should say that when I first arrived, we were working about 75 hours a week, so there wasn't time to do anything but sleep and eat and work. And that went on for several months at that tremendous rate. And Karen worked probably as much as any of us in terms of the hours. But then as things started to slack off a little bit, we had some free time and we had an opportunity to get to know each other better and discover our likes in common, such as fishing.
I was at the time engaged to a chap and was not looking to meet anyone. Nels he's a great fisherman, and I like to fish, and my fiance wasn't really too crazy about fishing. And I don't know, I guess Nels and I went fishing a few times as good friends, and consequently fell in love, and had to tell the fiance that the wedding was off. And Nels and I dated for a couple of years. He had 3 children. Nels was divorced, and 3 wonderful little kids, and I felt that we really needed to get to know them a little bit better, and they me. So a couple of years later, we married.
I think that I chased and chased her until she caught me.
Karen remained politically active. When Alan Dixon became Secretary of State in Illinois, Karen became the first woman to hold the position of Deputy Director of the Illinois Department of Motor Vehicles. Prior to leaving Springfield for Sarasota, Karen was city treasurer for 4 years.
She thought it was humorous when she was to be offered, through a political appointment, the treasurership of the city of Springfield, Illinois, the chief numbers cruncher, if you will. So she came home and told me of this humor, and I said, there's nothing funny in that at all, that you can do it, you've had math training, you just haven't used it, and now you'll have a chance to use it. And so one thing led to another, and she took it and did quite well at it.
In 1984, the Gustafsons decided it was time to leave the rigors of northern winters and head south. Nels decided Bradenton would be a perfect place to relocate his engineering practice, and Karen decided to take some time to find a position that would challenge her into the next century.
I was here almost 2 years. I answered an ad for the Women's Resource Center of Sarasota. They were looking for an executive director who seemed to need, or they felt needed to have the skills which I had, which were very broad at this point. Marketing, management. The center was 10 years old. It was at that next phase of growth where it was either going to go on or die. So I had done proposal writing in my former lives and all kinds of things. So I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll go in, I'll apply for the job. And I was offered the job quite suddenly. They had been looking for 2 or 3 months. They weren't impressed with the fact that I was not degreed, but a couple of people on the search committee saw something in me, I guess, that they felt probably resourcefulness, determination, and hired me.
That was in 1986. And we hired her pretty much immediately. We'd been without an executive director for 4 months and had looked pretty diligently. The board was with great anticipation and enthusiasm for what she was going to do, and she didn't disappoint us. She came in from the very first day. I knew this was going to be a good match. I remember telling my husband that I would probably not be home that first day that she came into the office. I said, because she doesn't know the job, and I'm going to have to explain some things and everything. Well, I came in there about 9 o'clock, and she'd been there for an hour and had everything under control pretty much. I just slipped out, said it's under her hands now. And from that day one, she just took over and did a very good job, I think.
One of the first things we decided to do was to identify the center very strongly, give it some roots in Sarasota, and we embarked on a $1 million campaign to build a new building, which today is probably one of the most architecturally significant buildings in Sarasota, designed by Carl Abbott. And I'm very proud of that accomplishment. Kathy Schurston was the president during those 5 years, and as I say, Kathy and I and a very, very good, strong board of directors really helped to move that organization forward.
It wasn't easy. There were some hard times. Many a meeting we spent down at City Hall during the commission meetings, along with Carl Abbott, who was the architect for our building, a very wise choice that we made of an architect. lots of rezoning, lots of talking to the neighbors, lots of permits. And of course it took, money, and so we had to contact a lot of donors. Foundations were lined up, and many of the friends of the Women's Resource Center came forward to help this dream become a reality. But Karen played a very significant role in this whole, in making it happen, to make it all come together.
With the Women's Resource Center on solid ground, Karen began to look for a new challenge. She was offered the position of president of the YMCA Foundation and felt this was a worthy cause.
Many of the YMCA supporters were friends from the Women's Resource Center. I felt very comfortable going there. Carl Weinrich and the board and LaRue Merrill and all those people were really starting to move that organization forward. And they, I felt, needed someone who could independently fast-track their need for financial independence to fund a lot of things which were coming down the line, and which 7.5 years later have come down the line, including the Evelyn Sodlier Jones YMCA, which is an almost $4 million facility, which our foundation raised the majority of the money for. The YMCA Shelter for Youth, which our foundation helped to establish by putting a package together for the owner and buying that for the YMCA. The Kalish House, which is a boys group home. The Rudy and Allie Lazarus Center, which is a counseling and administrative center, and on and on and on. Many programs and facilities which we at the YMCA Foundation have helped to put together for the Y Corporation as it pursued all of these wonderful programs, and obviously needed a lot of funding to achieve their goals.
Well, Karen, when she first came here 7 years ago, it was interesting because we were just going into a capital campaign, and that's not what she signed on for. It was mainly for deferred gifts and endowment, and we've been through 4 or 5 large and several other smaller capital campaign issues while she's been here, and she's been able to do that and make those very successful, as well as do a great job with our endowment and our annual giving campaign.
Karen is the consummate professional. She is extremely well organized, very dedicated, tremendously polished, and she also brings a very special closeness that she shares with the YMCA donors, the Y itself, and her own work and her own activities with the donors. She gets to know them. She doesn't treat them just as somebody that's going to give money. She becomes close family friends with most, if not all, of these people, and I think helps them achieve a special joy in donating to the Y, because they become so close to the Y family, and Karen is an integral part of the Y family.
Karen Gustafson works hard for people, yet always is aware of a higher power.
I believe very strongly that God has a hand in everything we do. I see it every day. I could give you hundreds of examples where we might even be sitting around strategizing about a future program or something that can help the kids, or if we could just get this piece of land, or if we could just get some funding for this program. And it just happens. It just happens. I believe if it's meant to be, and you have the people that can help create the resources, that I believe God has a hand in everything. And yes, I have a very deep belief in God.
Asked what she attributes to her success, Karen answers, a hard work ethic.
I guess if someone said to me, what do you think is your best attribute? It's the fact that I work very hard, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm sure that this is something I was taught from my earliest recollection. And if you ask me for something on Tuesday, I'll try to have it to you on Monday. And if I can't have it to you on Tuesday, by Monday afternoon I'll let you know why I can't have it done. I don't think in my entire career anyone has ever said to me, how are you coming along with this or that project, or when may I expect it?
And her advice to those who follow?
I think if you have a good, hard work ethic, you can always strive to be the very best you can and achieve anything you want to do. May not be as smart as the next person, may not be as good looking as the next person, may not have had the opportunity of the next person. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Just work hard and stay with your career plan and your personal plan. Persevere and get back to the hard work ethic.